As part of the work around mental health, I wanted to talk about the link between alcohol, depression, and anxiety. I'm Simon Chappell, and I'm the author of the Sober Survival Guide and the book How to Quit Alcohol in 50 Days. I'm a sobriety coach and a speaker, as well as an author, and I've helped people from all around the world reevaluate their relationship with alcohol and completely change their lives by deciding that actually they prefer a life without alcohol in it. And one topic that comes up time and time again is the link between drinking and depression and anxiety. It's something that I've experienced personally. Now, obviously, depression and anxiety are two different things, but they also go kind of hand in hand. And certainly from my own personal experience, I was a heavy daily drinker for well over 20 years. I would drink anything from 2 to 3 bottles of red wine every single day, often with beer or spirits on top. And I was totally trapped in the tight grip of alcohol, and it was impacting almost every area of my life. My relationships with friends, family, and the people closest to me, my ability to be a parent, my work and my career was affected, my health, both mental and physical, was impacted, my motivation and energy levels, and my social life. They were all impacted severely. And ever since I was a child, I've suffered from severe anxiety. It first started in my mid teens, and since then, I've also experienced mood swings. I wouldn't say it was full on depression, but I would feel deeply depressed for periods of time, and then I would find myself coming back out of it before sinking back down into the darkness again. And I would struggle. It would be really hard to get out of those moments. And the anxiety caused me to worry about things. And they were often, in fact, always things that never actually happened. And even when I put my mind at ease about one particular worry, I would then find something else to worry about. Yet I never thought to look whether there was a link between the amount that I was drinking and the anxiety and the trouble with my moods. I even went to doctors, counselors, even a hypnotherapist about my moods and my anxiety, the fact that I didn't really feel happy. None of them really dug into my drinking. The doctor did ask me how much I drank, but of course, I lied about that. And I have since found out that doctors usually double the amount that people tell them they drink to get to the right numbers. And these days, as well as speaking about the tactics for quitting drinking, I also talk to people about the dangers of alcohol, and I help them understand the damage that alcohol can cause. I think when people can understand exactly what the impact of heavy drinking is, it can help them move forward to a place where they don't want to drink anymore. Instead of feeling like they can't have alcohol, they end up getting to a place where they just don't want it because it seems like a lifestyle choice and they feel empowered to make that change. And when we drink regularly or binge drink or heavily, it's often incredibly subtle. The feelings of the low moods and the anxiety, the worrying, it's insidious, it creeps up on us. And before we know it, we're experiencing issues with mental health, but we can't pinpoint why. And instead of blaming alcohol, many people, including me, actually end up drinking more because they've long held a completely false belief that drinking actually helps to ease anxiety. It helps to soften stress and it takes away depression, which, yes, it does for a short period of time. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But this belief is totally wrong. And it's these beliefs that keep people stuck. The science proves otherwise. Alcohol is the master of illusion. And I hear from so many people who've seen their anxiety and their depression fade to almost nothing after they've quit drinking. Yet at the start, before they quit alcohol, they firmly believed that it was helping them to soothe anxiety and issues with low moods and depression. It was a firmly held belief. And often we're not open to having our beliefs challenged. We believe it, therefore it's true. And until people are able to take a step back and start to examine their beliefs with curiosity, they're going to remain in a place where they're stuck, and they're often stuck in the tight grip of alcohol addiction or daily drinking. Now, as I mentioned, depression and anxiety are two totally different things, but they're intertwined in many ways. Depression is the feeling of an incredibly low mood, feeling really sad, hopeless, lost, worthless. Often there's no energy, and in some cases, there's even suicidal thoughts. For me, it was the kind of day where I just didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want to go to work. Obviously, these things, like so many things, are on a spectrum. Sometimes we feel down and we have a bad day, and other times it can be more of a pattern, or we find that we're stuck in that low mood and we just can't get out of it no matter what we try. But for me, those bad days just came more and more often. I didn't put two and two together that the more I was drinking, the more often the bad days would come, the more often I'd find myself in a low mood. As I say, I didn't end up with full blown depression, but I was certainly well on that spectrum and I was well on the way there. I was definitely never happy during the time that I was drinking, which was over 2 decades. Some of the symptoms of depression can be a loss of interest in activities that we used to enjoy. And when we drink heavily, absolutely that happens. We believe that alcohol is the most important activity and everything else goes behind it. We start to forget about the joy that the really nourishing things gave us in our lives, and all we want is to drink. You can also feel significant sadness and a feeling of just being generally down and hopeless. A lack of energy and tiredness is often associated when people suffer from depression, as well as low self esteem, trouble concentrating, difficulty making decisions. Often there's increased anger and we can get irritated very, very easily to the point that we snap and explode at people. And often there's a general sort of sense of decreased motivation, energy, and productivity. A lot of people see a change in their appetite, which can actually impact with weight loss, weight gain, and people can often sleep too much or too little, which again can have negative consequences. Anxiety, on the other hand, is more around feelings of worry. For me, it was all about thinking about catastrophic things that might happen in the future, kind of fortune telling, making up stories about what's going to happen in my life, how things are going to go wrong, how things are going to play out, and you just can't get them out of your head. Obviously, these stories are generally not positive. They're negative, they're fearing the worst. And these kind of worries, they just won't leave you alone. They can keep you awake at night. If I was to score my anxiety out of 10, particularly when I was drinking, I would say it was an 8 or 9 out of 10. It was really, really severe. Since I've quit drinking, I would say that it was down to a 2 or 3 out of 10. That's the difference that cutting alcohol out of my life has made. So, what's the link? Why does alcohol cause depression? And why does alcohol cause anxiety? Because believe me, it does. It's scientifically proven that it causes these things. Alcohol changes the levels of serotonin and other neurotransmitters in the brain, and this can worsen anxiety, it can impact our moods. And in fact, people often feel more anxious, more sad, and more depressed after the alcohol wears off. They end up in a worse place than before they started drinking. But many people just don't pay attention to it. They don't get curious. They don't notice what's going on, how their mood has been affected before, during, and after drinking. When we start paying attention to this, which is exactly what I did, I really began to notice it. And I realized that it was causing me so many negative consequences. And alcohol induced anxiety and moods can last for several hours, several days. And for some people, they are like a permanent state. They can last for weeks or for months. And we end up thinking we're never, ever going to get out of this. There's no solution. And over time, it can just become a constant. And we think that drinking more is the solution because of the belief we've got about alcohol solving our problems and thinking that it eases anxiety, it makes us happier, it allows us to relax. Again, it's a myth, it's an illusion, but people are often seduced by the sedative effects of alcohol and they use it as a kind of medication to help distract them from persistent feelings of sadness or anxiety. But alcohol might appear to temporarily relieve some of these symptoms of depression and anxiety, but ultimately it worsens it all on a long-term basis. As the consequences of alcohol abuse persist, depression and anxiety gets worse and worse. Again, it's all scientifically proven, and I've worked with thousands of people from all around the world where I've seen this playing out in their lives. And of course, it played out in my own life. So I'm speaking from personal experience. And the more it worsens, the more we end up falling deeper into that cycle of abusing alcohol to try and self-medicate the symptoms of depression and anxiety that alcohol is actually causing in the first place. But we're failing to see it, we're failing to notice. Alcohol is a central nervous system depressant. It slows the body down, and studies have consistently shown that alcohol use increases both the duration and the severity of depressive episodes. And it also increases the likelihood, the frequency, and the severity of suicidal thoughts, which is frightening. It really is a scary prospect. And alcohol can also cause other stressors in our lives, things around our careers, our relationships, our families, our finances. All of these things can be adversely affected when we drink regularly or drink heavily, and they can all lead to worse feelings of anxiety and depression. And if we're drinking on top of that, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like pouring fuel onto the fire of anxiety and depression. And if the person who's suffering from depression then turns to drinking even more alcohol to make themselves feel better, that vicious cycle is never going to stop. And it can be so hard to break out of. It's all about becoming aware. And in some circumstances, the very heaviest of drinkers can drastically change and rewire their own brains, as well as impact on many of the other delicate chemical balances in the mind and the body. And this is particularly true around the brain's neurotransmitters, which send electric and chemical impulses and control a great deal of the body and mind's functioning. These systematic changes can cause depression. They can heighten anxiety. Now, when we take that first drink, we experience a euphoric feeling. I'm sure you've experienced it yourself if you drink. At that point, the brain is releasing loads of chemicals that make you feel a sense of happiness. And that's why we end up believing that alcohol is actually helping us. We feel good. Our inhibitions lower. We become more confident, excitable, and feel as though we've let go of our worries and our cares. But it's temporary. And it's important to remember alcohol is a drug. There has to be some kind of upside, or people wouldn't keep using it. They wouldn't keep coming back and taking more. And I often wonder if alcohol was invented today, whether it would ever be made legal. When you consider all of the side effects that you can suffer when you drink regularly, I actually doubt it. I don't think it would ever get out of the lab doors. Now, after your brain has had this huge hit of euphoria from all the feel-good chemicals that are released when you take that first drink, it needs to rebalance. It needs to get back to a state called homeostasis, which is the balanced state that it tries to remain at all times. Imagine it rather like a baseline of happiness. Your brain is always trying to get you back there. It wants to stay at that consistent level. Now, when it receives a huge whack of feel-good chemicals, it needs to rebalance. And to do this, it releases more chemicals to bring things back in line. These chemicals are depressants. Look up dynorphin, Google it, read all about it. Dynorphin counters the feel-good chemicals. It brings you back down again. Now, most people will continue drinking. They don't stop at one drink, and they enter a roller coaster of releasing feel-good chemicals followed by downer chemicals to try and rebalance the huge hit of uppers that the brain has just experienced. And this is why nothing ever feels as good as the first drink, because when you have that first drink, you've had no downer chemicals released. Everything's on the up. But after that, you're constantly chasing that initial high, that initial sense of euphoria. And all the while, your brain is trying to get you back to a homeostasis state. And you've got this horrible mix with this flood of chemicals trying to bring you back down down while the chemicals from the alcohol are trying to take you back up again, and you're trying to get to that place where you felt really good. And this is why you see people getting emotional, feeling unstable when they've been drinking. If you imagine, you might have seen it, people at the end of the night in floods of tears, their emotions are all over the place. That's because they're on this roller coaster. They've ended up worse than they felt before. They feel down, they feel sad, their emotions are all over the place. Everything's out of whack. Now, usually the brain releases a lot of the chemicals to try and rebalance things. It overcompensates when it tries to bring us back down. And this leads to a happiness deficit where we end up below our baseline of happiness. We're underneath that state of homeostasis. And this is where depression and anxiety happen. And over time, it can chip away. If you're drinking like that every single day, like I was, you become unable to get back to that state. You just end up going further and further down. And even drinking only just about gets you to your old baseline of happiness. You don't feel euphoria, you just feel okay. And you go back and back and back and further and deeper down. And it ends up feeling like you're caught in a terrible trap of alcohol. It's a tight grip and it can be really hard to get out of it unless you take the right steps. And this can cause the people feeling super sad, super emotional, especially people who binge drink when they're not used to it and they only do it every so often. They can be really unstable when they do this and when all those chemicals are hitting. And we can feel particularly bad the day after we've been drinking because we've had this enormous release of depressant chemicals into our minds and we're on this slippery downhill slope. Sure, that first drink might make us feel euphoric and maybe a couple of the ones after that might maintain it, but from there it's just a downhill slope to anxiety and depression. The next morning, especially when combined with a hangover, usually we feel anxiety and depression, and it's as though it's in ultra high definition. It's so much worse than before. Think about that. Think about those times you felt like that, or maybe next time you drink, if you do drink, you might want to pay much closer attention to it. Do you feel better than when you started drinking, or do you feel worse than when you started drinking? So all alcohol really does is hits the pause button for a very, very short period of time, maybe 30 minutes to 90 minutes during the first 1 to 3 drinks. But the trade-off is hangovers, regrettable behavior, and staying stuck in the loop of addiction, feeling down, feeling miserable, feeling anxious. And believe me, alcohol will then try and call you back by saying that it's going to solve all of your problems when you feel like that. Have another drink. You'll feel great again. You'll feel euphoric again because we build a tolerance. And the more we do this, the harder it becomes. The further away that sense of euphoria goes, it becomes impossible to ever reach it again. And we end up completely stuck and left feeling anxious, depressed, and generally down and unhappy in our lives. Even people who drink moderately are impacted by this natural cycle that takes place when we put alcohol inside of us. They'll experience changes in moods, changes in anxiety. It's all on a spectrum, and much of it is related to how much we drink. There are other factors, but that's one of the main contributors. So do pay attention to it, notice what's going on for you. And worst of all, as I say, this creates a sense of withdrawal and a craving to drink. We end up chasing the euphoric feelings and we have a desire to just get rid of the anxiety, get rid of the depression. And we end up, through a complete illusion, believing that alcohol is the cure and not the cause of the problem. And it just keeps people stuck in the tight grip of addiction. And this is what I help people with on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than just dealing with anxiety and depression, but it forms a huge part of it. And when I see people break free from alcohol and tell me that after taking a break, they've noticed that those feelings are subsiding, they're feeling much happier, calmer, and at peace in their life, it's an amazing thing. It's life-changing. Now, of course, some people do suffer depression and anxiety anyway, regardless of alcohol, but drinking on top of that is going to make it worse. And they need to understand that no matter what, alcohol is either going to make it worse or it's effectively going to be the cause of it. And I've seen the evidence, I've seen it firsthand, both in myself and in the people I work with. When people take a break from drinking, say 30 days, they quickly realize exactly what alcohol's been doing to them. But if they don't give themselves a chance to experience it and treat it like an experiment, they're never going to gather the data. When they gather that information and realize that alcohol is simply depression and anxiety in a bottle, they don't want to drink it anymore. They don't want to put that stuff in them. You imagine if you saw on the side of a carton of milk that it said, if you drink this every day, or if you drink half a pint of this every day, you're going to suffer from severe anxiety and severe depression. You wouldn't put it in your mouth. But alcohol doesn't say that. The warning labels are limited, to say the least. Hopefully that'll be something that we'll see in the not too distant future. But almost without exception, when I see people working on cutting alcohol out of their life, becoming empowered and making a lifestyle choice to live alcohol free, they get complete clarity on what's been going on. And they feel totally empowered in making that decision not to drink and to join the sober community. And they also start to get complete clarity on the true version of themselves. Very often, they've been living with a false mask on, where they've been using alcohol to kind of be a version of themselves that's not really who they truly are. I absolutely did this. I thought that everybody in my world wanted to see an extroverted party animal. But when I quit drinking, I realized that actually that mask's now come off and I'm a little bit introverted. I didn't even know it. And I started to work on being the authentic, true version of me. And believe me, life's so much easier when you can be authentic, radically honest, and completely true to yourself. So when I encounter people who are suffering from anxiety or talking about depression, I encourage them to start exploring their drinking behavior. And if they're drinking regularly, I talk to them about taking a break and allowing themselves to get some clarity around what alcohol is doing to their body, their mind, and their life as a whole. And then once they've got that information, they can make a decision about what lifestyle they want for themselves. When I first started drinking, I honestly believed I'd found the cure for anxiety and low moods, because for a brief period of time, it lifted me out of that. But the whole thing was a trick. It was a complete trap. That's what drugs do to people. They offer us short-term gratification, but the trade-off is our happiness, our long-term happiness. They just want to keep us stuck, so we keep coming back for more and more. And that's exactly what alcohol did to me. I thought it was giving me relief, but all I was doing was self-medicating from my busy brain and this worrying mind and the low moods. But it was simply for a short period of time. It didn't last long. And often I would black out. I wouldn't even remember what happened the evening before. And the next day I would feel awful. I often think about alcohol like a payday loan company. Payday lenders give people cash with extraordinarily high interest rates. And I've used this analogy in the past in my coaching, but that's what alcohol is like, especially when it's mixed with anxiety and depression. Imagine if I said I would give you £100 and that £100 would give you a day of relief from all your money worries. But the next day, I'm a payday loan company, so I want £5,000 paid back. You'll probably feel great on the day that your money worries are eased, but the next day you're going to feel awful. And that is exactly what alcohol does with anxiety and depression. But the benefit doesn't even last for a day or two. It lasts for 30 to 90 minutes. And then everything after that is the payback, the payday loan, paying back the interest. And this is what it does. It takes every emotional penny from us. It's the highest interest rates you can imagine because it ruins our lives. It causes us to stay stuck. It destroys relationships. It destroys careers, and it destroys our mental and physical health. Of course, some people can drink mindfully, and if that's you, that's absolutely fine. I certainly wouldn't judge that. But many of the people that I work with feel that they've got caught in this trap and it's an all or nothing situation. They need to cut alcohol out of their lives for good break free from it and find complete freedom. I spent over 20 years in that trap, thinking that alcohol helped me relax and it helped me de-stress. It was a fake belief and it held me back. It was a belief that limited me from being the best version of me. And I want you to be the best version of you, and all the people I work with to be the best version of them. And believe me, an alcohol-free life allows you to live that. Getting rid of anxiety and depression by putting down the bottle, seeing it fade away into the distance is an amazing thing. Of course, for many of the people I work with, it can feel hard when they start to quit drinking. They need to put the work in. They often need to experience cravings, setbacks, and unsettled emotions for a period of time. But again, that's a small price to pay for becoming unstuck and enjoying a life where they feel so much happier, calmer, more connected, present, and engaged in their worlds. And it's a wonderful sight to see, as I say. The more that people immerse themselves in the sober lifestyle and treat it like a hobby, a new activity that they've taken up, and they become passionate and motivated about it, the more successful they become. And many people see huge improvements with anxiety and depression just by taking a break from drinking. So if you're questioning that, or if you're thinking about it, just start to evaluate your own relationship with drinking. Look at how often you're having booze, what it's like before you drink, during drinking, and afterwards. And ask yourself how your anxiety, how your depression levels look to you. And ask yourself if you feel happy and comfortable to take a break from drinking. I always recommend 30 days. I recommend journaling it down, writing down everything that comes up for you, all the feelings, all the emotions. And I also recommend taking a selfie right at the start, because after 30 days without drinking, you'll notice the darkness under your eyes fades away. Your skin looks better. Many people will describe it as glowing. Often your face becomes thinner because your body's not hanging on to all the hydration, and you just feel so much better in yourself. And if all of that is going on the outside, imagine what's going on the inside. So I'd encourage you, if you've been having anxious feelings or low moods, try and take a break. You're welcome to reach out to me at any time if you need more tips. I've got a ton of videos online. As I say, I've written 2 books, The Sober Survival Guide and How to Quit Alcohol in 50 Days. Again, you're welcome to check those out. Any feedback, any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me.